Alright you guys, welcome back to another video, another real estate related video. Now, I have put out a video in the past talking about my first ever investment property. We ran through the figures, we ran through my attitude towards it, ran through absolutely everything. And that's what I want to do today about my second investment property. The first one was bought here in Alice Springs. It is a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom townhouse. The second one, very, very similar. It's still a townhouse, but it's 3 bedrooms. So a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom townhouse in an area called Upper Coomera, which is about 20 minutes out of the Gold Coast and about 40 minutes out of Brisbane.
Nothing can stop me, I'm all the way up. All the way up. I'm all the way up. I'm all the way up. Nothing can stop me, I'm all.
It's along that highway, that M1 highway that travels from Gold Coast up to Brisbane and then further on. And you know, that was an area that I became aware of probably back when I was like 15, to be honest. I was in New Zealand. I talked to my parents' friends. They were looking at properties in Coomera at that time because the value was going up. Now what I didn't realise is that in 2008, 2009, when the global financial crisis hit, the Gold Coast property market just absolutely shat itself. So if I had have bought in 2006, 2007, I would have lost any capital gains that I made in 2008, 2009. So it probably dropped by like 30%, and then from there, from 2009 up until today, so honestly like the next 7, 8, 9 years, it's slowly worked its way back up. And now, here we are in 2018, I think the prices are pretty much, you know, just a little bit higher than where they were back in 2008. And that's crazy, man. Like that's what can happen in real estate. So it's worth looking at history, it's worth doing your research, and then you can make an informed decision. But there are no guarantees, alright? So with that said, it came 2015, I'd bought my first property and I still had some money left over. I still had some money that I could use as a deposit for another one. And so I approached my bank manager and I said, look, what do I need to do to buy this particular property? So I'd looked, as soon as I bought my first one, I started looking for another one. I narrowed it down, came up with a purchase price, which was $300,000. I said I needed it to be in, you know, relatively good condition, in a good area. I needed it to have 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and be under 300 grand, like I said. So there's only certain areas in Australia, as you would expect, that have a property that fits those criteria. And so one of the areas was Coomera, and so that came back into my mind again, and it triggered the memories that I had 10 years before, talking about Upper Coomera. So obviously in those 10 years, the place had developed a whole lot. But what hadn't happened is there hadn't been a proper town centre built. And so I got some information about that. I realised that it's been in the works for like 15 years. Literally 15 years this town centre had been talked about. And I got some inside information that in 2017, 2018, with the Commonwealth Games coming, they were really going to try and push it and start getting it happening. So when that happens, the area of Coomera is going to increase greatly in value. So with all that in mind, I decided to focus on Coomera. I decided to try and get the best property possible, under $300,000, with 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a nice area. And so that's what I found. So I found a property, Upper Coomera. It was in a complex of 40. It's got a really nice, really nice gate. It's got a complex. It's got a little cul-de-sac going around a pool and a gym area in the middle. Really nicely done. It's, you know, immaculately maintained, and it's about 14 years old, the complex. So it's not too old. I ended up getting one of those for $291,000. $291,000 was the purchase price. The tenant had been in there for 3 years already, which was a bonus for me, and they've actually been in there for the following 2. So the tenant has in total been in my place for 5 years now, and that's a great long-term tenant. She's got no plans of leaving. The rent's paid every single time. I've had no complaints. You know, a rental property that you don't hear anything about is the perfect rental property. The last thing I'd want is things breaking all the time. You know, so a tenant that doesn't look after your property can be the worst thing in the world. You know, all you need is one major thing to go wrong, or 4 to 6 weeks of having the place empty with no tenant, and you can lose all profits that you've made that year. So it's really, really important before you do anything to make sure you've not only got a great tenant, but to get that great tenant, you've got to employ a great real estate agent. Personally, with this one, the real estate agent wasn't required because there's an on-site property manager, and that's what you'll find with a lot of these complexes of new townhouses. They will probably build 20, 40, 60 units, and one of them will have a manager live in them. So it's going to be a live-in manager. They make sure everything's maintained, they make sure there's no trouble, they make sure the rent's being paid, and it makes sense because they're on site. They understand, they know all the tenants personally, and so you'd think that if you are a tenant living in a complex that has the on-site property manager there, you're not going to fuck up too often. So with that said, that's the case with mine. So let's talk about some numbers. I bought it for $291,000. Today, 2 years later, it's valued just over 320. So let's say 321. I'm not just pulling that number out of thin air. Obviously, there are always units in that complex being sold. There's probably always one for sale. With that said, over time, over these last 2 years, the sale price has gone from 291, 295, 300, 310, 320, and there's been one sold recently for 321,000. So it's gone up 30,000. Now, property is negatively geared. All right, what's negative? What is negative gearing? It's basically the property is costing you more per year than you're receiving in rental income, and that happens when you have a high mortgage. That happens when you take out 90%, 95% of your purchase price from the bank, which means that your payment's going to be high, which means that that payment plus all the other expenses that come along with owning a place is going to be a lot more than the rental income that you're getting. But that's up to you. You're not going to put yourself in a position where it's going to go to shit straight away. So with that said, I knew that it was going to be negatively geared, which meant that I needed to get a great rental return. I needed a rental return above 5 or 6% for me to be able to maintain that mortgage debt. And so that is what I was able to achieve. Time of purchase, it was $291,000. I had a rental return of $380 a week, which means that's around 6.5%. 2 years on, the rent has actually only gone up $10, so my tenant is quite lucky. I feel like it could be $400. At the moment, the purchase price is $320,000. The rental return should be about $400, which keeps in with that 6.5, 7% rental return. So that's good. Over time, my mortgage debt is going to decrease. Over time, my rental return is going to increase. And that is what a buy and hold investment is all about. So these first 2 years, guys, I'll tell you some straight figures. These first 2 years, negatively geared, the property has costed me around about $5,000 a year. So 2 years worth of ownership, it's cost me out of my pocket $10,000, but the property has gone up $30,000 in value. So with that said, after 2 years of maintaining this property, keeping the mortgage paid, receiving my rental income, overall, take the profit of $30,000 less the $10,000 negatively geared costs, and it leaves me with $20,000 profit. So in 2 years I've made 20 grand. Obviously if I sold it now, it'd be absolutely stupid because of the fees that come with selling a property, and I'd probably lose all of that. But in another 8 years, when I've owned it for 10 in total, which is the major plan, I want to own both of my properties for at least 10 years. I feel like with the growth of Coomera, I feel like with the recent Commonwealth Games, it has put the Gold Coast on the map, because Coomera is not a part of Brisbane, it's actually a part of the Gold Coast. So I feel like Gold Coast has already gone through that crash, and I feel like buyers coming in now will see that. They look at that history and they feel more confident about buying on the Gold Coast. The Gold Coast was always seen as a place that it's kind of like it's kind of like a pump and dump. It was seen as a place where it was great for tourism, but there was no good jobs. And I feel like over time, that highway that goes from the Gold Coast to Brisbane is just going to get more and more and more and more populated. And eventually, there is going to be no blank stretches of highway that there are now. Coomera is right on the edge of, civilization. for another 20 minutes until you get to the first few suburbs in Brisbane. So I feel like eventually it's going to be more and more populated. That's what you need for property growth. I mean, the price of a property is not going to go up unless you've got a few crucial factors happening in that area, and that is population growth, that is infrastructure growth, that is more houses being built, more people, more demand, more houses, more schools, more hospitals, more public transport. That's what creates growth in property. And that is why the Australian property market is different than all others, because we've got a very, very young country. We've got a young, history. And so there's, the population growth is not going to stop anytime soon. So with that said, in another 8 years, I'm hoping that this property should be worth, in the region of 450, in which case my mortgage debt will be down at, I don't know, 200, and I'll have $250,000 worth of equity to then go pull out, bring my mortgage debt back up, use that equity to go buy another property, blah, 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 blah. I can see that happening in probably 5 years, not 10. So it's very exciting. This was my second property. You guys know everything about it right now, and I hope you enjoy it. So I'll see you guys in the next one. If you've got any questions regarding real estate, regarding my history, finances, anything like that, hit me up in the comment section below. I read every single comment and I'd love to help you out. Alright? Peace.